Hi, everybody. I'm just trying to set up everything here, trying to get a hold of Max Lofano. Unfortunately, this is going to be, a series of rocky starts before we get good at this. Okay. So when we begin, there's going to be a little question mark icon. It's the best way to ask questions in these videos. That way we can read them easily and we can both see them. Otherwise, we're scrolling through. So use the question mark icon. I guess while we're waiting for Max, does anybody have any questions? I thought Max Daly's video yesterday was really fun. I don't know how the whole Oslo thing went by the end of the day.
Hey.
Whoa, it worked.
It worked.
So Max, too, I don't know, do you see a question mark icon at the bottom of your screen?
No, not anymore.
So I guess just because I'm the host, I'm able to see it. So everybody, if you're watching, use that question mark icon at the bottom where the comment little thing is. So that way we don't have to scroll through and get all close. Nobody wants to see my face that close to the screen. Okay, so Max is at home. We were going to do a studio visit with him. Unfortunately, the governor and everything has changed everyone's plans. So Max is at home. I'm finishing up a day at Bread and Salt. I'm in the office here, so we're just kind of making things up as we go.
Welcome to my kitchen.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Max has all of his tools, right? And everything art at Bread and Salt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so little out of reach of all my stuff, but that's okay.
We've had so many artists in residence at Bread and Salt, and we've never had a situation like this where we couldn't share the final work that somebody created. So Max was in his final month here at Bread and Salt and was hit with this, whole thing of not being able to share his work. So, but in the meantime, how long have you been here? Because we extended yours.
Yeah.
Scheduling conflicts, but was it your fourth month? I can't remember.
Fifth month in the space. It's been awesome. I've been so stoked to be in that space and have a workspace that's larger than my desktop.
Right. And so right now you live in an apartment and you were working in your garage, or?
Yeah, so I live in Ocean Beach, here in my apartment now, and before the studio at Bread and Salt, I was making small works, and I had been starting to figure out how to work in that space by, I often collect found objects and take a lot of images, take a lot of photos and make images, and use different materials in all of my works, kind of still experimenting with everything, keeping all my doors open. But in my garage, on my desktop really, or my workbench, I was figuring out that plastics and glues like adhesives and paper and fabrics and materials that I can work with my hands were starting to work out on a smaller scale. Since I didn't have any shop tools, I was using my knife and using sandpapers and using scissors and tapes, a lot of tapes and scissors and just small stuff that I can work with my hands. And then I started to integrate images into those objects. So playing with putting an image in the object and playing with the materials and really just experimenting with the options I had. So that was before I got into the space.
Is that the stuff that you were doing at SDSU?
Somewhat. At SDSU, it was different. I was really, I graduated from San Diego State with my BA 2 years ago, and I was making many different things. Interactive sculptures, starting to do some installations in the space that they have, and just building different works of all different areas. A lot of things were interactive. I started making art as performances about 5 years ago. And when I went to SDSU after that, I was trying to make my sculptures interactive and performance-like. So they were objects that were plugged into the wall that were vibrating and with lights and were moving around and had that similar quality. So at San Diego State, it was kind of transitioning from doing artworks with my body and video work into actually making sculpture and then trying to make installation towards the end of my studies.
And on your website, there's a couple of photos I saw a while back of some performance pieces you did.
Yeah.
There was a duct tape one. You completely covered yourself in duct tape, and it looked like you were on campus there at SDSU. Or
yeah, that was in the main quad. That was one of my last performances I think I've done like that. And that one was documented by image, which was different. The earlier ones where I was documenting with video, and my earlier work wasn't really considering much past the performance. So I was just kind of considering the moment of the performance. And with that piece, the one you're referring to is called It Went Well. What I did was I got a couple rolls of duct tape and a white oil crayon. And it was this body of work I was kind of working on that was It Went Well. And I would write It Went Well on the roll of duct tape and then rip it off and then place it down, starting with my shoes, working all the way up my legs, all the way till finally covering my face and my head. And I did that on the quad at SDSU. And it was an interesting experience. It was, I thought more people would be watching and paying attention to it, but it felt like more people were comfortable not watching. So they'd see what I was doing. And they were kind of giving me space and stuff, and nobody batted an eye. People probably saw it and just kind of kept moving on because it was less awkward for them rather than paying attention to what's happening. So I didn't really notice people paying much more attention than just kind of cruising by and looking. And so it was hot and sweaty in there.
Yeah, I bet. And that piece kind of like in a quarantine sense and like some weird type of suit, it might come in handy on a school campus right now.
Yeah, maybe a little more relevant now, huh?
The pieces that you have in the back of the studio, I know, did you make those at school?
No, I made those in the back. I don't have anything I made at school. I made those in my space at home. So that was the work I was kind of starting to make with no studio space and with no more wood shop or sculpture shop or space to store anything. Right. It was kind of transitioning down, and I just started to feel like I could start a process with that had potential in that space. So they started
to kind of like stay on the same thing. I made some like really rudimentary photos so that we can all see. So does this work? Can we like just
I can see it
kind of piece by piece and talk about this kind of thing? Yeah,
for sure. That's so funny. Did you put it on a board?
Yeah, and nice. I have a bunch of photos here from the current studio. So,
cool.
I don't know if you can actually make that out or if this is just a horrible idea.
I can see it. I don't know about everybody else.
Well, if you can see it and you're okay with it, I think other people will be able to. I mean, people can comment if it is just a really stupid idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so that piece is one of the works I was making in my garage, in my small space, and just playing with materials that I had, and all the materials that I had, I was finding. Didn't really have a budget for any work, as I still don't. So I do a lot of collection And when I buy stuff, I buy them for cheap, secondhand at thrift stores and surplus stores. And some of the best stuff I find is riding my skateboard in the alleyways in my neighborhoods. And so that piece right there specifically is the motor and a trigger from the inside of an old drill I found. And it's just integrated into the foam that's behind it and kind of like playing with the object. And that object is kind of the center point of that, and just working with how to display this object that I found really interesting, and how to use materials to do the piece justice and to kind of turn it into an artwork. Something that, you know, I collect tons of stuff all day long, and finding something that's really cool versus finding something that's just got a really cool part of it, or just one little specific of it that's interesting, and then trying to work with the potential of the object. So sometimes these little pieces start off with the back, moving forward with the materials, but specifically this work started off having that drill, or taking apart that drill and being intrigued by it, and then working away from that, working from that object towards turning it into an artwork.
And it's a wall mounted piece. Just to describe it a little bit, I guess we have to kind of try and describe all this stuff. So it's like what, sure. 9 by 12 or something?
Yeah.
It's pretty small. I mean, well, I guess if that's a drill motor, I mean, you can kind of scale in your mind how big that is. But it's an interesting object. You know, it's not a painting. It's like, you know, weird wall mounted sculpture, but it's also like fairly 2D in a way. It's three-dimensional, but since you set it back into the foam, it's kind of doing all these different things. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was
using a flat surface to mount it directly on the wall, as if it's a, you know, a painting or something.
Yeah, looking at them, they're kind of like almost like little drawings I was making in my studio, though I wasn't using any, you know, drawing materials or anything. I felt like it's a very similar action to kind of making a smaller work, and just and they are somewhat flat work, so they do have objects inside of them and materials built on them. But yeah, this one hangs on the wall, as a few of them, most of the ones in that backspace are. But, you know, I've been playing with surfaces and shelves and how to display them. At the studio, at the Bread and Salt studio, was the very first time I've really seen them off my wood bench in my garage, which was so different. Everything, you know, my garage is a cave with no light and on a wood surface. So putting them up on a white wall made them totally different.
So I'm just gonna, you know, this is one more of this series, just so we can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. I just picked another one. You have quite a few back there, but
yeah. So this one has an image on it, and I took the image. I take images on my phone because it's like, you know, one of my only cameras right now, and so I take the images on my phone, and I got this one printed at Nelson's and Sports Arena, and I just I just take images all day long. I take photographs and cut them up and take them, and this one was taken on my phone. I take a lot of cars and specific parts of cars that I find interesting, like the wheel wells I find really interesting, or the sides of the grill. And I think the reason I find them interesting is because the color and the shape of them is very sculptural. Cars are very sculptural. And in a car in itself, you know, it's beautiful on its own. It's totally beautiful. It's got everything working for it. It's got transitions. It's a sculpture. So not using the whole car for what it is, but taking it apart and using these little qualities. So like, for instance, this one, the shape above the wheel well, it's got that little curve, and I didn't know this when I was making it, but looking back at it, I figured out, I think, why I found it was working. When I make these things, I just go on instinct and I play and I test. So I just pass a whole bunch of images by an object, or I just lay different materials under it, or I just put it on a different surface. And oftentimes the one that I had anticipated being interesting, that's rarely used. Usually the ones that I didn't anticipate, like for instance, an image going on this object, I find them and say, wow, that's actually got a lot more potential to be interesting. And so images like, or artworks like this, for instance, that wheel well has got that kind of natural shape, and I think so does that lunchbox it's placed on. So I don't know if you can really see it from the image, but that is a lunchbox, or like a little cooler pack that
Oh,
is for packing a lunch. And on the inside, there's these little dividers where you put the different parts of your lunch in. And the edges of it kind of have a similar form as that wheel well. And when I built it, I didn't know that was the connection, but I knew there was a connection. Um, and and trying to figure out how an object, an image can not just be a frame. I'm not really interested in framing these things, framing these images, but kind of creating a single object out of them that's got a greater
right.
potential.
I think you totally did that. It's less of a frame, more of a window, and
Mm-hmm.
photographs. So many times, a great photograph can just be a window or a painting. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
less of a frame. It's a complete object. If you are able to see it in person, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's a decorative addition to a good photo. You know, it's
Right.
an interesting partnership between the materials, and the brass
Mm-hmm.
and all these different, found objects with the found. Doesn't seem like you're altering the color either. That kind of
Mm-mm. No,
plastic
right.
material, that seafoam kind of color with the brass and everything is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's spot on. I feel like I love to find color in the world. There's so many beautiful colors out there, whether they're on trash or whether they're on a piece of plastic, and all you got to do is just work with it a little bit. I don't, I don't really like to start. I don't really paint very many things or illustrate very many things. I just like to find stuff that's got potential and see what I can do with it, because there's so much debris out there. There's so much interesting little things that are available to turn into artwork, and they're cheap and affordable. And I think if you can, or with myself, if I find what's interesting, there's a lot of potential of what you can do with them.
Right. Um, so, I mean, you're young. You just kind of, you just said you finished with your BA at SDSU. Was there, where did you start? Like who did you come across? I know you've told me some stories
Hmm.
of different instructors you had or people that you met, and
Yeah.
kind of being younger and being involved in baseball and different sports and things like that, and surfing. And
Hmm.
um, what was the transition to art that kind of made you interested in objects and things like that? Or
Mm.
you had some
Well,
great
yeah.
sports analogies and things of kind of baseball experiences that you had that I thought were kind of cool. I don't know
Yeah.
if something comes to mind, but we've had so many conversations. I'm just trying to pull
Hmm.
from all things that we've talked about.
Well, my transition into art was different than my transition into objects. Um, so my transition into objects came more studying with Richard Keeley at San Diego State and learning how to see what I was interested in and find where my tastes were within what I'm seeing in the world and using them. So that was later, as I was already trying to commit to make art and be an artist. But my transition into art was earlier on, like I said, with the performances. And I wasn't really making art as a kid growing up. I wasn't focused on art. I was just interested in playing and having fun and being an athlete and just I don't know, just living my life. But little parts of that informed what I did as I started making art. So when I transitioned into trying to be an artist, I was doing those performances because I didn't have any technical skills of what I thought was art, was drawing and painting, of course, or illustration or any of that. So I was just doing artwork as performance and making really poor quality videos and doing 2-minute performances. I was really inspired by Chris Burden. He was one of my first favorite artists who I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is really powerful stuff. And that's kind of where I started to want to be an artist. And that was an early direction of mine.
I'm just looking, we got a couple questions, and if anybody has questions, use that question mark icon. That way we can share the question and everybody can see it. Um, so Christian Garcia Ovalo, which he's going to be an upcoming artist in residence, but
Yeah, Christian.
we're redoing our entire schedule. We're going to be reaching out to everybody, unfortunately, with, we don't know what's happening, but Christian's a great artist. But so
Yeah,
he
he
says,
is.
what makes an item intriguing?
That depends. All items are all objects or materials are different, but I think It's not about how beautiful or ugly something is. I think that an ugly object can be just as intriguing as a beautiful object. Um, and I think that it's almost like a scale. And on if it's far enough out on either side of the scale of my personal taste, then I'm interested in it, ugly or beautiful. And sometimes the ugly objects that are intriguing have more potential because their potential is maybe a little more hidden, and to bring that out can be a challenge but more fun. So I've just developed a taste of what I like in the world, and that just comes from looking and seeing and making decisions and having biases, and all the time it's textures, it's surfaces, it's color, and a big thing is the light. Just looking at houses, old OB houses in the evening or in the early morning light, it's like those two are just what I find, when I'm looking in the world and making my decisions.
Yeah. And you're not from San Diego, right?
No, I grew up in just south of Santa Cruz in Aptos, Watsonville, California.
Cool.
Hmm.
You told me a story too about being able to travel to Japan
Hmm.
with a couple of instructors, right? Well,
Yeah, that was in 2017 in the summer. There was an art show in Komi, Japan. It was an art rally, and that was curated by Yoshi Hayashi, who was my professor at Miracosta, who was he was a great professor of mine, taught me tons about art while I was there, and he was kind of my mentor while I was doing performance artworks and doing more video works. And he has a relationship with his sensei. So Yoshi is a performance artist and a potter, a ceramicist, but not just a potter, he's a ceramicist. And his sensei lives in the small town of Komi, Japan, which is a small mountain town. And they have a relationship to the museum there, which they invited, Yoshi curated 5 international artists to go out and do an art residency for 15 days, as well as ending in an exhibition. And I was the assistant on the 15-day residency and prep for the exhibition, which was like such an amazing experience as a young artist to just see how these artists work, see what they were building, and just getting to be at the residency where we had a private chef, and we were like walking for 15 days straight. We woke up in an art house with a studio the size of a half a basketball court where we were sleeping in sleeping bags, and we'd wake up, we'd eat hard-boiled eggs and toast, and we'd walk down to the museum by 8 o'clock, and we'd stay there till 7 or 8 at night, and then we'd walk right back up. We did that 15 days straight. It was a dream. The museum was beautiful. The people were great. And just to see how these 5 different artists worked, they were all building artwork there for the exhibition. So they brought in their suitcases what they could. Dean Ramos was an artist, and he brought a mold. So all he did was bring a mold that we made concrete molds the whole time we were there. Richard Keeley brought a few small sculptures, and then he went out and bought stuff that he could work on there from the Daiso. All of his stuff came from the Daiso markets there. Another artist, Bill Gilbert, he is a performance, or he does these walks where he walks the solar system and he maps out towns and locations. So he just went on hikes every day and did these walks and documented what he found. And one day he's so committed, he had to hop a deer fence with barbed wire. And Bill comes back one day, and he's an older dude, but he's awesome. He's got this young spirit, and he comes back with this gash in his arm, and someone had to pick him up and bring him back. And he's like, yeah, there was a deer fence in my way, and he had to hike his map. That was what his deal was. And so every single day, and he had to stop that day, which was because the deer fence stopped him, and because he was gushing blood out of his arm, and came back. And then the next day it was pouring rain, and he wrapped up his arm and he went back to the other side of the deer fence and finished his walk. So to see these different processes, but everybody was so committed to what their artwork was really cool. As a young artist, to see you get to choose what you want to do as an artist. And
yeah, being able to work with other artists, and especially older, more established artists, that mentorship that kind of happens is such a,
yeah.
it's something that just kind of vicariously you're learning just by being around somebody, learning how they might install something or might have, how they actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was huge. That was so important for me and so much fun. It was just like, man, if I could do this for the rest of my life, there's no doubt that's all I want to do.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
We'll try to keep kind of a story going of your background as we look at stuff. I just want to see if we have any other questions.
Ask them up, people.
Yeah. I guess if you want to read it.
When you're creating a piece, is it more strategic on placement of items or is it more instinctual? Ooh, it's all instinct, baby. In the moment when you're making it, I don't know. I just trust my eye and just move like that. You know, what I've learned is that if you're not sure if it's right or if you're not sure if it's there yet, then it's wrong. There's no doubt for me. It's like if I'm not sure about anything, it's going to be, odds are it's wrong. It's just you know when it's right. You know when the relationship is right, or at least I do, like in my work. And it doesn't come easy, but it's just like, if I'm not sure and I leave the studio or I leave the space, I'm like, I wonder if that's working or not. It's going to be wrong. I have to wait long enough until I can see that it's wrong. But if I'm not sure if it's working, it's wrong. And that's just instinct. And it takes looking at it with fresh eyes to understand that for myself.
So just kind of, now that we kind of gave a little background, when you first came to the studio, I remember some things that you started to do in there, and one of them was like things like this, which it's kind of been in there a while in the studio. You were basically bringing attention to some really neat things that were happening already within the building. You know, Bread and Salt being an old factory, it was a bread factory, 1896 to 2006, and we've left it, you know, pretty raw. The building is, you know, it's something that we all love here. The building has so much beautiful ephemera from the factory and so much really neat history. So somebody like you that works with found objects or is inspired by natural colors and things, I mean, the whole building is kind of a palette to work from. But
for sure.
This piece has intrigued me.
Yeah, I don't know where to take that piece or how to take that piece. That's been up there for a while, like you said, and I've tried different things. But it's what it is if you can't see it in the photo, is it's just it's a square or a rectangle that is laid around this elbow of this pipe, and that elbow has these three arms that hold it. And they're so gorgeous. There's like these three super specific arms that they could just be vertically clamped straight down on it. But they're at these weird angles holding this pipe. That's just this big connection that I thought was so cool. And I'd been looking up there and just, you know, made the blue outline in the tape. And I think why I've just kept it up there and been looking at it is because of the blue of the tape and the red of the elbow. And the way that the square rolls over the different creases on the wall, I think there's something there. Who knows? I gotta just keep playing with it. And that's the thing about that space. It's not about, for me, I wasn't taking it on as just to create finished work to take with me. I was just in there to see what I could do. I have never had a space like that before, and I've never had, you know, that much freedom to be an artist. So
yeah, it's a big studio. That ceiling, we're looking at the ceiling. It's hard to tell from the photograph, but that is the ceiling, and it's a 13-foot ceiling, I think. It's a pretty high ceiling in there. So it, you know, when you walk into that space, it kind of is this weird forced perspective too, because you're kind of squaring this topographical area, because there's a column on the right that has all these, you know, odd starts and stops, and then you have right angles with the ceiling meeting the wall, and you're also highlighting what's happening in this kind of inner space with the pipe and everything.
And I feel like that piece works better at different angles when you walk by it, and like when you kind of walk around it, especially from outside of the studio, when you're walking into the space from the courtyard area, the frame, or the, you know, the blue frame actually really holds that elbow in there sometimes really nicely, and it has this this visual perspective that can be really interesting and really dynamic, with the right placement of where you're looking.
Yeah, that's a really, I don't know. I've been kind of, you know, because my desk in the gallery is just kind of across from your studio, so I've always kind of stared at that piece every time I walk in there.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, if feel free to ask questions too. Use that question icon. I'm just gonna grab another photo of something that I've seen in your studio. We can back up if you think that something's more important.
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanna start small and kind of, I guess, ask you about a few things that I see you doing in there, and that you've done around the building. Which sometimes we don't know if it's dealing with somebody like you that uses found object kind of stuff. We
Yeah, I
never
like
really
that.
know what's going
I
on.
like if you're not sure if it's art or not. I think that's
Yeah,
kind of a fun thing, is like, you know, is that art? Did he put that there? You know what I mean? And to get someone to question that, I think, is a really interesting experience.
right. This is such a horrible photo to be able to be trying to show this piece, but it's a extension cord and an additional extension cord, and there's other bits of material that you've hung from the ceiling.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah, that's the right side is an extension cord that I've been just like in love with the way the cords, you know, the cord makes a drawing on the ground where you just throw it on the ground, and just the natural lines of the of laying a rope on the ground, or laying a cord on the ground, is like, and trying to turn that into an artwork. So I've been experimenting with that, and the way I've been doing that is I've been clamping cords and putting them on the wall. I've been hanging them. I've been hanging them by string, hanging them by different strings, twines, and then most recently I've been sanding extension cords. So there's a piece in there where I'm just working on figuring out how to transform the entire cord, and it's just by taking really light sandpaper to the entire cord, and then how to install it will be my next question. So these are just kind of experiments with the cord. Like, again, I'm finding potential with this material, and now I'm just exploring how to use it. And it just seriously came from cords lying all over the floor, with string wrapped in them, and the different surfaces. What's really important is the background of what the material contrast is on the ground or on the wall, different like that.
right. So I know that was hard to see that particular piece, and it's going to be even harder to see this one, but maybe you can describe what's going
That's it.
on. So you're using mason string or masonry or
Yeah, I'm
construction
like,
type
where is that?
string. Can you see it?
No, I can't see it at all, but I know what it is. I've seen it. Yeah, that was just exactly what you said, the mason string, and it's been all over the studio, that stuff. I've been in the studio, I've been responding to the space and taking my same approach as like responding to an object or an image, and instead responding to the space. So instead of taking a found object, it's taking a material and adhering the material within the space. And so I've drawn a lot of lines in the space with different types of twines and strings. And again, just experimenting. I know there's something in there that's interesting, and trying to figure out, you know, how to find that and how to make it into an artwork that I think is worth it.
Mm-hmm. Another question.
Yeah.
Maybe you've already touched on this kind of thing, but
when did I get into this kind of sculpture? Well, I mean, this specifically, working in this space, has really changed the type of work I was making. My goal was like, I didn't want to build anything I can make in my garage in that Bread and Salt studio. That was like, I'm like, I have this, when I got offered the space, I had it for 3 months, and it was like, I'm going to use this space. I'm not going to use it to keep producing the work I can produce in my garage. I wanted to see, like, I've never had the opportunity to build any type of work I wanted because the space doesn't have any restrictions on it. So I think that was the biggest thing of the space, was like, that's when I started to experiment with sculpture that I could use in there, because I finally had the opportunity, the space, to actually make larger works or respond to architecture and interior architecture, different things other than a small object on my desk.
I think at the moment when you happened to apply, you also had done a piece at Art Produce that all of us here at Bread and Salt, we didn't know you. We had just heard about you doing something, and a lot of us ended up at that opening and kind of went early to see it. And you had this really great piece, and I should have had a photo from it, but we didn't talk about you working at Art Produce, and you had this really successful found object show there. I'm sure some people had seen it, but that was a really neat show, and that's something that we all got excited about, seeing your work.
Thanks. Yeah, that was like my first like public installation that I had built. And Art Produce, Lynn at Art Produce is awesome. She's been one of my mentors and had my back for a long time, and she gave me the opportunity to build a piece in the space. I've been installing there for 3 years and working with many artists in the space. And so yeah, Lynn gave me that opportunity, and it was one of the coolest things was that Bread and Salt only accepts physical applications. So I got to drop a show card in the mailbox, which was cool. I thought that was.
I feel stupid putting this question up before you, but yeah, I mean, we want to be really, I guess, kind of approachable when it comes to people dropping off applications for the residency program. We don't want to exclude anybody that doesn't have access to a computer. We want it to be very approachable for anybody applying for the residency. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we don't just have e-applications, why we ask that people drop something off, and you don't have to meet with us in person to drop it off, but we just ask for a hard copy so that, you know,
there's a hole in the wall. Drop it off in the little mailbox in the wall.
Right. We're pretty simple here.
No, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, Kathleen Mitchell, who is has a glassblowing studio here at Bread and Salt, she said that was a great show at Art Produce. I know a lot of people saw that. Again, if you see the little question mark icon at the bottom of the screen, tap on that and ask a question through there. It's easier so that we can show everybody the question.
I saw that last question from Jim. He said, do you write about your artwork? Yeah, I write about my artwork on receipts and torn up note cards and bits of paper and little things all over the place. I write down little things all day long, and they just get piled into a drawer, and I just am always, and for a while I was trying to keep all these little writings and thought they were important, but now I'm just like, what's important is that I keep talking about them and keep writing about them, because the most important thing is the next note card. I'm not writing well thought out answers on, you know, in a well organized notebook. I wish I was, but I'm not. I'm writing on bits of pay stubs, you know, little things, note cards,
well,
all
as an
this
artist,
stuff.
you make sure you save those receipts. Maybe that's a good way to learn how to save receipts by
I know, I'm trying to save them. I know. But honestly, I get so many and I just toss them. And then keep going.
I just want to keep moving forward here. Can you see this? Is this?
I can see it. Am I blurry for you? I feel like your window's a little blurry now. Or your
no, you're clear.
Okay.
Maybe it's my connection, or
maybe. But I know what it is. It's that was the installation I built in the residency studio on my second month. And I think, I'm not sure, I would like some input from anybody. If you guys have a title, if you saw the piece. I think I'm calling it Sing.
Weird. Well, it says only I am blurry, so I wonder what the problem is. Is this weird?
You weren't blurry when we started.
Weird. That's annoying. So you can't see the photo.
It's just blurry. We can see it, but it's blurry. Only Tom is blurry.
Huh. Did that change anything?
It's still loading for me. Hey, it's a little better. No, you're back. Wait, move the image. I'll see you. Because I don't know if it's just the image or not. Yeah, you're back.
Well, I got rid of the Wi-Fi, so.
Well, there you go.
Any better?
Yeah, much better.
Jim says it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing.
I know. Like, come on, people. We're trying over here.
call it blurry. It's just a lag. Yeah. So that piece
So you can
was an
see it.
installation. Yeah, much better. I can see it much better. That was an installation I built the second month, and like I said, I think I'm calling it Sync. What it is it's plastic, black plastic, stretch over 2x4s that I made. That the piece sat in the center of the residency space, and I filled it with water, and I also added black dye to the water. So
I know it
it,
sucks we have to kind of tell everybody all
yeah,
your smoke and mirror tricks, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
But
you know,
yeah,
you don't have to tell us all your little, secrets of your tool bag, but
yeah. But I think it is what it is, and that's what the piece was. And when there was no dye in the water, it was a really nice reflection, and you couldn't really see the bottom of the plastic. But when the black dye went in there, it just went like super clean reflection, and it had this really deep dark reflection. And this piece came from just testing these little things I was filling with water. And one of my things I wanted to do is I wanted to make work that was kind of like had a relationship with the space. And so I was playing with lights at first and reflections of lights, and I had a vibrating motor on one of these boxes of water that shook, and then the light had reflection, and just all different options of what the piece could be. And I finally came to this iteration right here of the piece where I got 3 clamp lamps, and I wired them to extension cord, which is kind of where my extension cord experiments now are coming from. And what I did was I was testing them all over the walls, because I knew they needed, if the light was facing down on the puddle, then all you would see is the blown out light and the reflection. So it was really important to have the light facing upward. And because what you see that is lit, as long as it's not right on the puddle, you see really well in the reflection. So I hung 3 clamp lamps at different heights, hanging directly over the puddle from the ceiling of the space, and they all were pointing in different ways to show different parts of the ceiling that I thought were really interesting. So in the reflection, the room was somewhat dark down below, and then the places that weren't lit were also dark. So in the reflection, what you saw was these 3 areas that were like really chaotic, with the pipes and the ceiling and all this stuff happening that I thought was really cool in the space. And that was what was illustrated in the reflection, as well as the clamp lamps themselves. What I didn't know before I made that, but once I made it, one of my favorite parts of it was the lights were sticking like straight up. They were just completely like, they looked like they were just exactly opposite of what they were doing in the room, and they were standing straight up like a little sculpture inside the reflection. So
yeah,
that
I
was
mean
that was
that
interesting.
piece was so deceiving. People thought it was like a casting pool for epoxy resin, or
Yeah.
it people really were intrigued and confused at what they were looking at, and it was always fun to watch someone walk into that space.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been one of those artists that constantly is experimenting. Some people might be satisfied with just making such a large scale piece. They would think like, I'm done, but you
Mm-hmm.
used it as you're on to the next thing. That all that work just informed the next thing that you were doing, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of informed your work with the chords. And yeah, I see you in there still working with some of the plastics and water, which we'll
Mm-hmm.
get to another piece in a minute that has um, more water and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
couple questions here. I just want to see if it has to do with.
Okay. I'm gonna close this window. I think one of my neighbors is using the
Okay.
top saw. Yeah, a lot of people walked into that space. It's interesting working in that space because it's a studio, not a gallery. And people come
Yeah.
in and they expect it to be a gallery, and a lot of people expect to see paintings on the wall or artwork that they
Right.
know is so clearly art. And they see that thing on the floor, or they see that thing on the wall, and they go like, where's the art? Or, is
Well,
this not finished
also,
yet? And I
yeah,
just
I
am
mean,
like, well. what you
I
take it.
spend a lot of time telling patrons that, it's a studio. It's meant to be creating and experimenting with work. It's not a gallery. We have plenty of galleries in the building where you can
Right.
see finished works or, works on paper, flat works, and, traditional things. That is a studio. It's a workspace for somebody like yourself, a younger artist, or, it doesn't have to be a younger artist, somebody that is kind of on the beginning of their, arc of a career. It's a space to experiment and create. So somebody here, I can't read this name, but were there specific emotions or feelings you wanted to evoke with your larger installations?
I think that with all the artwork I make, the things that I want to evoke are much less important than the thing that it actually evokes. So for me, I am just making work, and specifically with that installation or a larger installation, I'm making work that has like something really interesting in it, and I usually, I would say that I find that, and then I decide to follow that. So I would say that that piece does evoke some specific feelings and some things to think about. There are specific things within it to think about, but I don't necessarily want my statement to be involved with that, because what's most important for me is someone to walk into that room, not expect to see that thing, and have an experience with it on their own. That's what it's all about for me. I want someone just to walk in there and, for better or worse, to get to experience the work for all it is, untainted by my voice, untainted by anything, and just really get to take what they want to take from the piece. And though I do think, as an artist, I am registering what I think the piece is about, and what the piece, what the statement or the feeling or all whatever is within the piece. And I am very aware, and I am studying for myself and for my next artworks of what that might be. But I want the viewer to have. I think the most important thing is the viewer to have their experience with the artwork. So I don't want to step on, I don't want to like suppress anything that a viewer might potentially see in the work, because if they see it, then it's there. I mean, the whole thing is like, the artist has the relationship with the work, and the artist gets it to a point where they see it's worthy for other people to experience, and then the artist steps away, and then a viewer has a relationship with the work. So then it's the viewer's work. It's not, I mean, though I made it and I've got these interpretations and I know the inside, the bottom, whatever it is, it's more important for the viewer to have that relationship with it next.
Right. So just moving forward with other things in your studio, I'm sure you have plenty to say about this piece. I don't know if you can see, is it still blurry? Is it okay? Or?
No, it's not blurry anymore. I mean, it's obviously not easy to see in person.
I'm so sorry we're trying to show this stuff, and if you don't want to share with everybody what's going on with these works, you can tell me. We can skip it.
No, it's fine. This piece is a bread cart from the building that I just rolled into the studio without asking anybody and just started making art with. Yeah, I thought it was a gorgeous bread cart, and my friend Klein is a great artist, and she has this rack in her studio that she's covered in plastic, just simply to keep the contents on the rack clean, because it's in a workspace. And I've always been intrigued by that rack and the covering of it with the clear plastic. So I thought, like, maybe this is my opportunity to kind of pursue a piece like that. And it started off, the very first thing I did was wrap plastic on it, and it was just clear plastic. I was working with that plastic for the water pieces. And then I started playing with the inside and creating shapes and forms on the inside. And so I finally, after a couple iterations and a couple of tests, found that fiber tape. It's mold resistant fiber tape. So it's a green fiber tape that's mold resistant. It had just a really nice quality on the inside, and to create really straight lines. And so I've found shapes that I was interested in. And I worked many shapes in there, and then I developed the shape to really hold its ground on the inside of that bread cart. And what I found was most interesting was these really straight planes within it, because the bread cart, the horizontal racks really dictate what the shape is going to be. So I had to work with the cart. If the line if it was going to run through one of the racks, it wasn't going to work. So just being in response to the cart and playing with what the cart had to offer. And there's 4 carts in there, and I don't think I can make that shape again in any of the other carts because the racks are different. So
Right, you're
it was.
dealing with a found object from the bakery, and that's
Mhm.
probably, that cooling rack could be 100-year-old,
Yeah,
apparatus.
really
It's
cool rack.
definitely been used. It has flour and grease on it.
Tons of
Um,
flour.
yeah, and it's this imperfect grid that's within the
Hmm.
kind of confines of that rectangle. It almost makes a loom, so you're working with a gridded structure, but obviously it's imperfect because it's handmade.
Hmm.
But you started messing with the geometry in that
Hmm.
imperfect form. So it's funny you're doing such calculated moves and you're using these straight lines in an imperfect grid. It's pretty interesting to see what's going on in there. And it's so unfortunate that people can't see this thing up close, but I know we'll save it for a while so that in the
Yeah,
future, when this is all over, people can come and see it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's been a fun one to work on. It was a challenge. That was for me not, it didn't just happen. It didn't go to plan. Let's just say that. It took a lot of turns to figure out what it needed.
do you want to keep talking about this one or?
Sure. Yeah. The final thing I would say is that I ended up, instead of wrapping it in plastic, I wrapped it in like a wedding veil tool. Um, so because the plastic was taking away too much of the inside, and the inside was so important to find out what material that I could wrap it in, because it needed to be wrapped really tight. And the wedding veil tool allowed you to see the inside, and it also had like a pattern on it that was similar to the grid and the fiber tape pattern. So it was kind of like your eye can focus on the tool. Like from a distance, you can't see the material around it. Then you get up to it, and then you can see the tool, and then your eye can only focus on the tool or on the fiber tape at once. You can't really see them both. If you to look at one, the other kind of goes blurry. So I thought that was an interesting relationship in there.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting. And I noticed that effect. It's kind of like it kind of makes like a moire kind of effect because of the two gridded fabrics kind of fighting each other.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to move forward to the next piece, I mean, this piece you were still working on that piece, like you didn't finish it, right?
The bread
The
rack.
bread rack piece.
I think I've finished the physical elements on it for now. I'll know when I walk back in because I've been out of there for a week, so
Yeah.
it'll be like actually really interesting to walk back in there with fresh eyes and see. When you work on something for so long, it's easy to lose sight of it. So I think I haven't finished it because I think the lighting is going to be super important. So whether it's in the daylight or in a cool light or whatever, but yeah, the piece isn't fully resolved. It still has
Um,
room.
if anybody try to ask questions, I see there's quite a few people here watching, but
Mm-hmm.
throw some questions out there so we're not just blabbing.
I see one. What are you on to next? Well, I am right now. I'm just hanging out in my kitchen, trying to trying to figure this all out. What's going on, and
Right.
how can I make art? And I don't have any of my stuff here because I moved it all to this the Bread and Salt studio. So right now, I've just been trying to be at home and get our house straight and be set up to be at home for a while and figure out what that means for me. But as art, and hopefully I have scheduled to do a residency at Art Produce coming up. They just started a residency program, and that was set for, I think, October. Um, yep, there it is. Do I know what I will create, or will what?
Or will you approach your time? It's weird. It doesn't let me read the entire question. That's Melissa
Mm-hmm.
Walter, which is a past artist in residence here at Bread and Salt. Um, I'm such a newbie with this stuff. It's not letting me finish the question.
Mm-hmm. I,
Um,
I have an idea for the space. Um, I've been at Art Produce for a couple years working, and I love the space there. And I've got a couple ideas for every part of that entire building. So I've got the cooler room, which is the new residency space in the back. It's got one long white wall with a short white wall at the end. And then it's got the other two walls, a long concrete wall with three windows in it with bars. And that's a long kind of like messy concrete surface, and then a short messy concrete wall with a big door in it. So it's a very specific space. And I plan to build an installation in there. And what I want to do is I want to build a singular piece that involves the entire space and utilizes the light from the window, as well as there's these wooden rafters that line the entire space. And the roof's about an 8-foot ceiling, I'd guess, 8 to 9 foot ceiling. So it's not very high. Maybe it's taller, maybe it's 9 to 10 foot. But I believe my work is going to hang from the center of the rafters in the center of the room. And I'm going to start developing materials that I think have potential. And a lot of the stuff I'm working on, I think, is going to transfer over into that installation.
Do you always try to pre-plan something, like, or do you?
No.
You know, I know you know that space well because you've worked there for quite a while now. But you know, would you ever let a space dictate something? And would you? Well, Melissa gave it a thumbs up. I guess you answered her question.
Lynn said it was 8 foot, for all you wondering.
Yeah, and that's such a cool space. I mean, there's so many neat little cues, like you were saying, the window and kind of just the look of that room. Which if people haven't been to Art Produce, you know, when you get a chance, go to Art Produce. It's such a great space. And
yeah, right now there's artist in residence. There's 2 artists in residence there right now. One in the front gallery, one in the cooler room. I believe programs are closed right now, as everything is. But yeah, once everything opens up, they've got tons of artists in residence on the schedule, and I'm obviously the schedule will be affected. I'm guessing like everybody's schedule, but it's got a lot going on this year between the garden and the 2 galleries. It's an awesome space.
So if those other photos you weren't able to see, we're not really able to see what's going on in here. But we'll just kind of plug along and try to see if we can get an idea.
Yep. So
is it blurred? Yeah.
For those of you who have been in the studio, that's under the stairwell, right when you walk in the door to the left. Built a piece in that stairwell. Tom actually built a piece in there. When did you build your work in there, Tom?
I did it in 2015 or so. And for all of our past artists in residence listening, they all knew very well that space was off limits. I kind of claimed it as my own because I was a past artist in residence, and I really loved the piece that I made in there. But over the years, viewers had inadvertently and unintentionally damaged the work. So I kind of gave up on protecting it. And also because of my role in the building, I felt like it was unnecessary to be claiming more space. So past artists in residence had wanted to do stuff in there, but it wasn't until recently that the piece had gotten so messed up, I just decided to stop kind of protecting it. And then you came along and you had asked, like almost everybody else had asked, and I finally just kind of gave in. So, but yeah, it's an interesting space, and I was intrigued, as many people are, just by the door alone. You know, it's this old door that opened into a storage area for the bread factory, and that door has a date on it of 1918, which I always thought was really cool. So, you know, it's an old building. So, I mean, that's how you approach this piece that you just made, is that there's this door on it.
Yeah. Yeah, the door is gorgeous. That room is so weird. There's a couple of spaces in the building that are like that. When you had said that that's been somebody's office at some point, you're just like, wow, a cement sloping ceiling that goes all the way from the ceiling all the way down to the floor in there. And it's not a desirable office, but it's an awesome space to work with as an artist. It's this really like ominous room.
So this is a horrible photo. This is with the door open.
Right.
And it's not focused so much, but you can see that it's a standard door opening. And this is the last photo that I have, and you can kind of try and, if it's worth it, you can try to answer a question about it.
Yep, that's the piece in the photo. Yeah, so the piece is just it's just in that space. And what it is it's just meant for the viewer to walk up and stumble upon and look inside of it. And I don't know if you can see in the photo, but there's that little foot, which is like a little piece of steel. And then behind that is two different materials that are kind of, they're both black and they're both got different qualities. And in the evening, when you're standing there, it's
Not sure what happened. I think everybody trying to figure out how to work all this stuff has just kind of made the system crash, possibly. Just gonna try and add Max so we can. Let's just try to finish up because
what happened, Tom?
It crashed.
Got bored?
It actually said the video ended and it didn't give me the option to save. So, you know, we're just we're making
it up as we go. That's okay. That's probably a good thing.
You know, I heard lots of rumors about the internet not being able to handle everybody doing all this stuff from home.
There's probably a higher power telling me to stop rambling.
They're like, art doesn't matter at this
time. Yeah.
I keep
save the bandwidth.
Like, you know, what does it mean to be a young artist right now and be faced with the realities of like all this stuff? You know, I'm an artist myself and I keep thinking like, you know, that's what it compelled me to try to do these live videos for Bread and Salt and try to figure out how we can all interact as artists when, you know, commodification of art has, you know, kind of gone out the window. You know, what do we do when everybody's trying to save toilet paper and buy food, and then all of a sudden people that make work, you know, all these artists that want to work as professionals, what do we all do, you know?
Yeah.
So what's it like being a young artist and looking into that tunnel?
I don't know. Being a young artist in general is like, you know, it's got its own challenges built within, you know, like trying to make money and pay rent and also try to make your art. So I think it's really cool what you're doing right now. I mean, I just think it'd be great too to just do virtual studio visits with other people and see what their studios look like. Studio visits are so cool for artists to see how other artists operate a space and what they're doing with their place. And maybe right now is a great time just to tune in and see what other studios look like. Maybe that's a positive thing that people can see.
Tomorrow we're going to do a visit with Griselda Rosas, who's our artist in resident at Seaport Village. She is now working from home and she's doing small works on paper. She's doing watercolor and, you know, this embroidery work on paper and things. So we're going to be kind of, you know, trudging through the mud forward and just trying to figure out how to, you know, visit with artists. And especially in this circle of Bread and Salt, we're going to be expanding out and trying to visit with people. But we have Kathleen Mitchell, who has the glass blowing studio at Bread and Salt, and a few other people. So we're going to keep going out from Bread and Salt.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's what, I mean, might as well, right? Might as well stay positive and see what cool things they're doing in studios. Even if everything's on hold, it's like, check it out, see what these artists are doing. And I think it is a rare thing to see into an artist studio, you know, so I think it's a good opportunity for that. Maybe that's something easy we can do to enjoy. I mean, it's better than all the other stuff we see on our phone all day, that's for sure.
Right. And yeah, I'm so bummed right now. It did not give me the option to save that video, so it'll only be live for 24 hours. So what a drag. I don't know if I can get an app. You know, a lot of people are probably laughing that I don't know how to do all this stuff, but
that's all right. Yeah, I'm not going to miss it.
Well, yeah, thank you for doing it today. I know that was not how we expected your residency to kind of culminate, but
no, I understand. It's the way things go sometimes. We all got to figure out what's coming up next and how to keep making art and staying healthy, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Max.
Thanks, Tom.
And I think we're done, and, you know, tune in every Tuesday through Saturday. We're going to be doing these videos with different artists and creative people, starting with this kind of Bread and Salt tenants or people that have shown here. And then we'll be moving out, you know, expanding into people, you know, everywhere.
Other
But,
artists.
with this Instagram live thing, we can actually have a conversation and see some people's studios that don't live in San Diego. So, it's a neat kind of thing. So something kind of came out of it, I guess. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Maybe
thanks,
people will
Tom.
get sick of these videos and stuff, but
you're doing good things, Tom. Keep it up.
All right. Well, thanks, Max.
See ya.
And see ya.